At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.
You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Hello and welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. Thank you so much for joining us. It is officially Sunday, April the 5th, and we have an amazing show lined up for you for the next 2 hours. We are still quarantining here amongst this COVID-19 pandemic, and I hope wherever you are that you're staying inside and you're staying indoors and you're hanging out with your loved ones and you're enjoying this week's episode. But we have a lot to talk about. I'm actually going to be joined by a longtime mentor of mine. He is the Associate Professor of Marketing at the McMaster University's DeGroote School of Business. He is a champion of experiential learning, and he's become a close friend as well. It is Professor Mandeep Malik who will be joining me. And for those of you that know me personally, I think I might have dropped some hints every now and then when I do the show. My day job outside of New Theory Radio is within brand marketing. I am a brand marketer. I studied marketing in school. It is one of my passions. I am a student of the marketing game. I guess you can call me that. And it's interesting times for the marketing industry. And Mandeep and I are going to dive deep into what the current pandemic impact is on both companies and brands, as well as consumers. A lot has changed when it comes to the way brands are speaking to consumers nowadays. You're not seeing a ton of mass campaigns rolling out anymore because the mindset of a lot of consumers have changed regarding what they want to see, how they want to feel, what they want to be notified about. And we get deep regarding many different topics involving brands and companies in this COVID-19 world that we're living in. And we also talk about which brands are doing a good job when it comes to speaking to customers, as well as we talk about brands that could be doing a good job. And then we also talk about the kinds of messaging that customers want nowadays when it comes to this new normal that we're facing and the realities of the next couple days, few months. Who knows how long this is going to last for. So how do consumers want to be communicated to throughout everything that's going on? So it's a bit of a business heavy episode. And then we drop some theories on the future of brand marketing after COVID-19. So if you are a student of business, if you are a marketer or advertiser, or someone that always has an interest regarding consumer behavior, this will definitely be a unique episode involving that. And then we are going to switch gears a little later, and I'm actually going to be joined by an individual by the name of Dave Scott. Dave is the host of Spaced Out Radio, which is a brand new show coming to the Sauga 960 AM station. And Spaced Out Radio will be live on the station, actually Monday to Friday from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So it is a late night show. And Dave's show talks about the things that you normally don't hear about in mass media. And I'm talking a lot around the paranormal. So we're talking aliens, we're talking Sasquatch, we're talking conspiracy theories, and Dave does a really fantastic job in really digging deep into these topics with his various guests. So we got Dave on this week's show to talk more about Spaced Out Radio, how he got started. Funny note about Dave is he actually started his radio career in sports, so it's an interesting pivot for him now to switch over to paranormal, and he's done a fantastic job in creating a following around Spaced Out Radio, which is a show that attracts listeners all across the world. And I've always wanted to talk about real conspiracies on New Theory Radio. We are the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And the word theory for us is really around allowing people to share an opinion or a thought as to why things are happening. But I've always wanted to dig a little deeper and actually talk about some conspiracy theories. So with Dave, we actually chat about a few different conspiracy theories. We talk about Sasquatch, which is one that Dave is very familiar with. He actually feels as if he had an encounter with Sasquatch, which is a very interesting story. We also talk about the Loch Ness Monster and just some of the sightings and some of the stories that people have regarding this monster up in the UK. And then we briefly chat about life in space. Do aliens exist? I don't know. Dave has talked to individuals that have had alien encounters, and he definitely shares some tidbits regarding life in space and why he thinks that it exists, and why we've yet to experience it. And I'm sure we'll experience it very soon, because technology is certainly catching up to us, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for us to discover sooner than later that we're truly not alone. But all this and more on this week's episode of New Theory Radio. I do thank you for tuning in. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, we are going to be joined by Professor Mandeep Malik from the DeGroote School of Business, and we're going to be talking all things marketing in this COVID-19 world here on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM.
Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. It's no secret in this world that we're currently living in when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic that it's really impacted the way a lot of companies are operating, a lot of industries are running, and it's definitely impacting the way that a lot of these brands are almost speaking to their customers when it comes from a marketing lens. And being that myself, I have mentioned numerous times in the show that I do work in brand marketing during my everyday job. I thought it'd be good to really talk about this on this week's episode, because it has been a huge shift, a huge change for a lot of companies who are looking for ways to speak to their customers in a way that's not only sensitive to what's going on, but in a way that's quite normal regardless of what's happening around us. And here with me to speak about this in further detail, I have a close mentor of mine. He is someone that has taught me for many years when I was a student at McMaster University. He is an associate professor there and a huge champion when it comes to experiential learning, and I'm very honored to have him on the show to talk about this in great detail. I have Professor Mandeep Malik joining me. Mandeep, thank you so much for being finally on New Theory Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nav. It's a dream come true.
I'm sure. I think in a normal circumstance, I would have loved to have you in studio, and yes. I would have loved to have those nice glamour shots that I take of my guests, and I think you would have fit in very well. But again, we are living in what a lot of people are calling trying times, and before we sort of jump into this, because I know you live and breathe marketing for a living, how are you holding up right now in this COVID-19 world that we're living in?
Hey, just like any one of us, I have my good days and I have my bad days. I think my, daily walk by myself has become reflective, and it's something I look forward to and keep myself in good cheer. I try not to turn on the news until late evening. I know the news affects me and causes me to freeze up, and in a sense, all that information, it's hard to process, hard to understand, and paralyzes you. Mm-hmm. So doing the best I can, and like we all are, and staying hopeful and positive, because it's hope that keeps us going.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And I think right now, when it comes to the news, it's become a routine for a lot of people to, turn on these addresses that are taking place amongst different, government leaders regarding the status of what's going on. And, to your point, it can get very exhausting, especially when, it feels like things aren't necessarily getting better and there's more precautions that are being taken. And even yesterday, when you had that address done by Ontario Health regarding, what this would have looked like if we didn't social distance and what this could look like sort of towards the end of the pandemic, it's not the best thing to watch for morale, and it can take be very very, very negative regarding how the current situation is and how people should be perceiving it.
True, without doubt. I mean, as individuals, we need to know what's in our environment, what's influencing our today, what's going to influence our tomorrow. We try to keep control on ourselves and our actions and determine every choice that we make based on the information available to us. Just like businesses and brands do. But sometimes that information can also become very overwhelming. And, in marketing, we measure consumer sentiment all the time. Mm-hmm. Economists and countries measure consumer sentiment. Not a good time to be measuring consumer sentiment. We know what it is. We can look within and really tell the life we are all currently living and what it might mean to our today and our tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's sentiment's a great segue regarding the topics of conversation that I want to chat with you about. And that's specifically the role of companies and brands during this pandemic. And the one thing that I could say, even just being part of a marketing organization without giving it away, but that's truly at the front lines when it comes to a lot of what's going on during this pandemic, it's been challenging. It's been very sudden regarding the adaptation process in regards to being able to be obviously more reactive than being proactive in this situation, because a lot of people have been talking about how, this is very similar to the SARS outbreak or what had taken place a few years ago with swine flu. But I don't think any of us has really seen anything like this before when it comes to the industry. Being that you yourself are a professor in marketing for numerous years, what's been sort of the feeling among some of your alumni students or even those that within the industry when it comes to the challenges that they're facing? And has there been anything that they've been telling you that's been really standing out in your mind regarding how different life is right now versus how it was even a month ago?
Well, it's had a very sobering effect. I think the first issue to keep in mind is that none of us were prepared for this. It's not what we had considered even in any of our extreme contingency plans. Mm-hmm. The good times blind us to what is, around the corner that we cannot see. And this completely blindsided everyone. So was anyone prepared? probably not. How are people reacting? The best they can. They're trying to take examples from the lived experience in other parts of the world, China and South Asia, where this has been happening for probably 90 days now, and seeing, given our circumstances, given our resources, given the constraints that we face, what do we do now? So every choice has become somewhat of an experiment. And we are learning by doing. We are, taking actions, and those actions are having some form of resonance or reaction, and we are learning from it. So we are living in a very dynamic state, and things change by the minute. And feelings that consumers, customers, business organizations have around their markets, their products and services are also getting affected. Something that was considered an essential service 2 days ago is not an essential service anymore. Mm-hmm. And they now have to change, look at it. It's a completely new paradigm, right? Because they were up and running, but now they can't be. So lots happening on the go, nothing that we had asked for, and we'll have to live in the moments that are ahead of us and do the best that we can.
Yeah, and the essential service point that you bring up is a fascinating one, because even just recently, as of yesterday, 18 months ago or 20 months ago, the big industry that a lot of people were looking at as being, the new, the almost like the new kid on the block was the cannabis industry, and as soon as that got legalized, there was a whole movement of different marketers and different business professionals that were going over to the cannabis industry and to be a part of something brand new. But as of yesterday, cannabis is no longer being considered an essential service, and the Ontario government is only allowing their Ontario cannabis store to be open. So again, it's these unique challenges that are definitely at play here, and it also makes me think about some of the other sectors within marketing that are truly being impacted. I've seen articles in Ad Age that have described what's going on as almost the death of out-of-home advertising, which was a lot, I would say within recently, and I think there's been a lot of innovation in that space that's been very thought-provoking and very interesting when it comes to geo-targeting areas with billboards, but in a different fashion, even including digital aspects to that. And then a lot of event-based marketing, which, when you think about the fact that event-based marketing really is driven by the amount of impressions or the amount of engagements you can get with customers from a face-to-face standpoint, this completely strips that away. Do you see any of these marketing functions having a tough time bouncing back after all of this is over?
I don't think so. I think, what surprises me right now is that 3 weeks in, and we are already, saying that outdoor advertising is not going to be the same ever again, right? And we are creatures of habit. Soon this will be behind us, and soon as this is behind us, there is a very high likelihood we will return to our old habits. Mm-hmm. Soon as we return to our old habits, everything that we were, identifying as a high risk category is going to be back in its old form. Will there be some innovations? Hopefully, but given the experience in China, given that they recovered in 55 days, that they are back up and running, that their public transport systems are in play again, their essential services have all opened up, factories have kick-started production, Workers are back on manufacturing lines. I wouldn't call this the death of outdoor advertising just yet. We have to see how long this stays with us and how that affects consumer habits, consumers' relationship with different forms of media, and what that means for the future. Too early to say. I know that for sure.
One of the interesting articles that I read this week was the study that IMI had done. IMI, which is a marketing research firm, talking about consumer perceptions of COVID-19. And they polled over 900 Canadians over the course of the last couple of weeks. And 35% of Canadians right now say they want companies to inform them about how to avoid COVID-19, while 31% say that they want companies to donate a portion of their sales to local hospitals and to really have a community lens when it comes to their efforts. Who in the past 3 or 4 weeks that this has been really going on has really stood out in your mind as being a brand that gets what's going on and has been able to pivot their communication to speak to a customers in a very authentic and meaningful way?
I think the probably the only one that sort of resonated with me was Budweiser campaign, where they are indicating to people, hey, this is about being one. This is about being in it together. This is about cheering on the frontline healthcare workers and those that are putting themselves at risk because these are beer brands and alcohol brands are really interesting because they survived. Budweiser survived on sports season kickstarting right now, and right now the heroes are not on courts, but in hospitals, right? The heroes are not on fields, they are in grocery stores, right? Making sure that we have enough food available. So shifting the focus and helping people understand who are the true heroes amongst us, who are keeping our lives as close to normal as possible is something that Budweiser drew attention to in a very emotive way, and that resonated with me.
Yeah, and it's quite fascinating you mentioned Bud because there's been this strong movement amongst the alcohol spirits industry over the last few weeks to repurpose a lot of their production to develop sanitizer, and that's been something that's been a trend that I've noticed amongst that industry specifically is, taking some of their key elements that they use to produce their products and repurpose it in a way that's going to benefit the current situation. And you're starting to see that now with fashion houses, where I believe it was even, I might be wrong, I might have to double check this, but I think brands like Louis Vuitton and some other brands are now shifting their focus. I know even New Balance, they're using a lot of their materials to create face masks for those that are on the front lines. Do you think customers who are normal consumers of these brands are going to remember these tactics as once we get out of this pandemic?
And the interesting thing is, Nav, that if we are doing as a brand, as an organization, if your intent and purpose is that, hey, I'm doing this so that you remember me as being a good citizen and you reciprocate by putting out your dollars in favor of my brand, then we might be disappointed, right? Mm-hmm. If we are being authentic and doing this genuinely because we realize that we have a responsibility as a global citizen to play a part in ensuring that our markets remain active, that economic activity can be sustained in the foreseeable future and brought back to a level where it's a win for all, then we are making a good choice. But if our intent and purpose is driven by that eventual greed and expectation of a payback, then then we'll be disappointed. Will consumers remember? Brands sure hope so. And if I think they have done it with the right intent and purpose, yes, consumers will remember. This might be interesting. My wife is a physician, and she had, she's obviously busy, constantly preoccupied with what's happening in the industry, and she had just called for some gardening help, for mulching and soil, and heard back from the landscape service provider who had worked for us last year. And the response was, hey, I know who you are, and I'm not going to charge you.
Wow. Right?
Wow. Did that mean something to her? Absolutely. Is that something she's going to share with probably 10 other people who are going to share it with 10 other people each? Absolutely. But is this, landscaper doing it with the intent of payback? No, I think the landscaper is doing it because they feel that this is where they owe their dues right now, right? This is what they need to do to put good out there, and the good you put out there is going to come back to you in multiples, right? What goes around does come around.
Yeah, one brand that I also thought did a fantastic job here is probably Uber. Like, Uber has a full campaign going on right now, and I believe it's on social, as well as if you are, obviously if you're an Uber user, they have your email address, and I think they've done a bit of an email campaign as well around telling customers not to use their service so that they can go and provide free rides to these frontline workers, or even provide them meals using the Uber Eats app. And, again, they've also taken a step that, knowing that restaurants need, local restaurants need support right now, and they're encouraging contactless delivery when it comes to takeout of some of these products. One other ad that really resonated with me, it was one of the early ones that I saw a few weeks ago when I noticed that brands were starting to talk about this, was Hotels.com with Captain Obvious telling people to not use the website and to just stay home, which I thought was very powerful, because, again, Hotels.com is really around, their entire business model is getting people to use their website so that they book hotels for when they travel. And to me, that I think that's when you, as a customer, notice the severity of what's going on, where these brands who have a core service that they're offering, and you can tell it's being directly impacted based on what's going on, is helping spread the message around safety versus being selfish in this era. And I think that's important. Do you, just out of curiosity, are there any brands that you've seen that haven't been able to adapt, or you think could maybe do a better job with how they're communicating right now?
Nothing specific comes to mind where I feel they're doing a bad job. There are enough out there who are sort of joining the bandwagon, if I may, and telling people, hey, look, I'm good, and I am saying to you what I think you need to hear, and I hope you feel positively because I'm saying this to you. So, there are brands out there that are not really digging deep and considering what is it that is stopping my customers' life as they were living it today. How can I go in and understand those moments which have become interrupted, and how can I speak to those interrupted moments in a meaningful way? How can I add value there? Sometimes the value is, maybe I'll stop saying things to you that create dissonance in your mind, that make you feel that you could be outdoors, you wish you could be outdoors, and you regret not being outdoors. Right? So brands have stepped back and taken their foot off the pedal and said, I don't need to be sending out marketing messages right now that will create, rock the boat, right, and make people feel frustrated with their current lives. I need them to know that this is a time where the choice that you are making to stay safe, to social distance, physical distance, wash your hands, all of those choices are good choices. And we, as equal citizens, stand alongside you. When you think about brands, Nav, these are, in a sense, to me, a business is an economic activity. A brand, to me, is a manifestation of a human spirit in some dimension or the other. And that human spirit has taken a hit right now. And the brand has to be able to speak to that hit and express the innermost feelings that people may not be able to on their own, and be able to tell them, hey, you're not in this alone. We are all in this together, and we'll come out of it because of the choices that we make right now. That's the only way we can come out as a people who have beaten this virus and taken control and won back what the virus had taken away from us, taken control of our lives once again.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's the crucial role here, as everyone is consuming as much content as they are, and the way that everyone's being spoken to right now indoors is really through TV or through online or through social. Is how do you use that real estate that you've bought in a way to speak to the customer's current position and really be empathetic in a way as well. And I know even on the brand that I work on, that's been the challenge that we've been facing is, we think that there is a clever voice that our brand has, but how do we've also built a lot of equity in a certain lifestyle that right now isn't really the best to emphasize right now, considering buying behavior is considering the amount of panic buying that's taking place, or what a lot of our stores or what a lot of grocery stores are dealing with. So it's really around finding that human voice within the brand and be able to, be empathetic, but also be able to stay on brand as well. Because to your point, I think it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon and then totally not hit the mark and be considered someone who's being inauthentic versus actually, helping a customer along. One other example before we sort of wrap up this segment that I wanted to bring forward is, again, a lot of brands are pivoting, and Visa comes to mind because, you talked about sports earlier, and I think sports is the summer season, especially the fact that we were supposed to have an Olympics and we were supposed to have I believe a Euro Cup this year, and right now we would have been in playoff season, so I think you would have seen a lot of different brand activations. Is you're starting to see people who take existing marketing assets and try to find ways to reposition them. And I think Visa's done an interesting job by taking what I would assume would be a gigantic sponsorship spend that they had associated with the Olympics and a campaign around these athletes, and still running with the campaign, but using it as a way to tell customers to be an Olympian and stay home and let's all join in as one major team, similar to the position that Nike has taken as well. Do you, just before we conclude this first segment, do you feel right now is the time where, what's the best way to say this, that maybe the leash needs to come off, or not the leash, but almost the, do you feel right now is the time where brands have to be as nimble as ever in regards to being
reactive and almost taking a chance with putting something out there, versus some of the challenges a lot of these brands face when it comes to, getting things approved, when it comes to bringing something to market, when it comes to being fast to react. So I guess what I'm trying to ask here is do you feel right now is the perfect time to really embrace agility versus, trying to get everything fully vetted before it hits the market?
I liked what you said earlier, Nav. I think now is the time to be authentic. Now is the time to be true to the very core needs. So if I was Visa or I was MasterCard, I'd be thinking, what's hurting my customers right now, and what's hurting their customers is probably the fee that they have to absorb when transactions happen at a grocery store, in a restaurant, right, for takeout, right? And maybe it's time to step back on that and say, hey, we're giving a break to all of these businesses that have been affected by costs, right? And we are making sure we do our part to, take a hit on our revenue to make sure our customers can sustain themselves for the next 60 days. Right? That would be telltale. Would it be a hit to the bottom line? Yes. But that's a hit for the right reasons. Should you also be telling people to be an Olympian? Sure. But I think what is really important is, give people the break that they need. Right? Don't be that landlord who continues to demand that you pay rent when you don't have business. Right?
Exactly.
I have to think about as a decision maker as any of these lending organizations, what can I do to ease up and make life easier for business? So that becomes critical, right? When I think of stores and grocery stores, it's not about advertising their specials anymore, right? It's about the customer experience when they are at the grocery store, right? Have I made changes that are visible to people that make them reassured and confident that I have done everything in and beyond my power to guarantee your safety? That's where the marketing dollar needs to go, right? Not in deep discounts, not in come to me because these are the specials. Come to me because I have stock. Come to me because I know I can make you shop easily and safely. Don't even come to me. Tell me what you need and I'll bring it to you in the security of your own home. And I'll do it right. And, integrity pricing is paramount.
A lot of what you do is focused around fostering the future of marketing when it comes to the teachings that you provide your students. And I'm very curious, what have some of your students been saying throughout all of this? It's obviously an interesting time for anyone that's studying in regards to the amount of e-learning resources that are going to be rolled out over the next few weeks, or if not, they've already been rolled out depending on which area you're studying in. But also, I'm sure there's a bunch of students that you've taught that were probably on the verge of graduating, probably on the verge of potentially securing internships. What's been the overall feeling amongst some of your current students regarding what's going on?
There's a shared disappointment now. People have lost internships. People are graduating on a low note instead of a high note. People who had job offers, those job offers have been withdrawn. So a lot of people are facing a tomorrow that they don't know what to do with. And that has sort of left them wondering, okay, where do I go from here? And as of now, of course, nobody has answers. But even this particular unexpected hit that they have taken, whether it was in the classroom or convocation time or internship or a full-time career, that to recover from that will take a little bit of resilience, or a lot of resilience. And you've fallen down, you get up, you dust yourself off, and you kickstart your search again. Or who knows, the job that you thought you had lost may be back as a full-time offer come May or come June.
Yeah. It's fascinating, even in my position, because I have a number of different students or even marketing MBAs who reach out to me just for personal advice, or who have inquired about different opportunities within the company that I work for. And I could tell with what's going on that it's probably not the best situation to be in, for sure. And even seeing, I kind of think back to my time being an undergrad student. I graduated around when the recession had taken place. And I don't think with what's going on right now, the recession totally compares, because right now is really a standstill for a lot of different organizations and industries. But I remember the issue that I think I was facing back then was just the amount of limited jobs that they were being offered. Like, there were still people in my cohort that were getting opportunities, but it was a bit more competitive. Now, to your point, based on what's going on with COVID, it sounds like just a total, hiring freeze, if not withdrawal of opportunities, because companies are just unsure what the future looks like, which again it's tough when you come out of school and you're so ambitious and you really want to, make the world your oyster. And right now there's just something going on that's even bigger than you and bigger than the company you're trying to work for.
Yeah, and it's nothing that any one of us can control. So, you have to take a deep breath, look at the problem for long enough to be able to come up with a solution that, and you may not be able to. Everything might remain grounded to a halt for another 30 days, another 60 days. Life may not be back to normal, fully normal, for another 90 days.
Yeah.
You've got to make the best of it, and work on yourself, right? Students sometimes have been through school, going through the motions.
Yeah.
And, if they go back and look at even their last semester, they may not have even cracked open the textbook that they bought for $200, right? And maybe it's about, hey, are there knowledge gaps that I feel I can act on? Do I know how to code? Can I learn that? Can I introduce myself to the design of digital marketing? Can I pick up on something that I had low familiarity with? Can I refine my skills in this whole space of using Excel effectively? So there's a lot of upskilling that people can do and be better prepared for 60 days hence, 90 days hence, and come out of the gates at a very different speed. Right?
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. I think right now, I find, especially as you get older and you work and you start to have other passions that build up. One of the biggest things that I've always wanted was just the ability to either slow down or have a bit of a break, to take a step back. And I've been coining this as an opportunity to, reset and reflect, or reflect and reset, depending on what you want to do. And right now is the time to either pick up a new skill, or either, reevaluate stuff that you've been doing and to really think about moving forward if it's all worthwhile, or even find ways to better yourself. And I've noticed a lot of people within my network that are starting to run seminars online. I think you and I were talking about some knowledge sharing that you've been doing with some previous alumni regarding B2B selling, and just using this opportunity to better yourself and to get some good learnings. And I've had the opportunity over the last couple of days to be invited to different online virtual think tanks regarding some of these issues and what the future could look like. So yeah, I think right now the mentality for anyone who's listening to this that's maybe going through a bit of a hardship is really using this as your chance to better yourself and to find this time to prepare yourself for whatever comes next coming out of this. And that's a great segue into what I want to talk to you about next. You being a professor in marketing and being known amongst various circles as being the marketing guru, and that's not because of your background. I wanted to ask you, coming out of this, because I think the world's going to look vastly different. And again, I totally agree with you that we are creatures of habit, and I think there will come a point in time, whether it's in 90 days, whether it's early 2021, or whether it's something down the line, where the world is going to shift back to where it was before this had taken place. But from a marketing lens, what do you see, and what's your theory on the future of marketing post COVID-19? Because I do feel that's something that a lot of people are thinking about, and some people are thinking about it in a way that things will go back to normal, so I'll be able to do my marketing campaign the way I did it before, or I will be able to continue to run exponential marketing experiences because people are going to want to get out of the house. But just like we've seen in other parts of the world, once things stabilize, there is that bit of transition that takes place where you may have individuals or customers that are almost nervous to get back into normal proceedings. So we'd love to get your thoughts on this and to understand exactly what your theory is on what the marketing world would look like post-COVID.
So I don't know if I can call it theory, but I do want to call it my hope. And my hope is that we will not quickly forget what happened, why it happened, and how it affected us. And if we don't let ourselves forget it, then we will reconfigure ourselves and start talking in very different voices, start presenting very different experiences, start living ourselves as brands in a more authentic and vulnerable way, right? So that we are then able to create relationships, renew relationships with existing customers, create new relationships that are much more enduring, that are much more tightly knit, that are based on solid and formidable trust, that are not transactional in nature. And that's my hope, that each and every brand goes back to its mission and revisits it. It goes back to its value system and says, hey, given the lived experience that we just had, how do we want to be seen? What do we want to lead with? What do we want to do? How do we want to participate in the lives of our customers and create meaning for them? At the end of the day, everybody is searching for meaning. And we need to know, are we understanding and delivering on that meaning? Are we helping create that meaning? Are we speaking to those hopes and taking care of those frustrations? Or are we fighting price wars? Are we back to, being on primetime television, making ourselves visible on game day, hockey night in Canada, Super Bowl, the playoffs, because we believe that's where consumers make choices, that consumers chase the fame that brands have. Will it be about fame? Right? Maybe it will not be. Maybe it will be about respect. So we'll have to think and consider and go back to those intrinsic human values, what I was talking about earlier, that, I don't see a brand as an economic activity. I see it as a manifestation of the human spirit. And that human spirit has been affected. So, when coming out of this, we have to come out as a new avatar and present a different kind of human spirit, so that people who follow us, we become examples to them. We become beacons of hope, and brands become those lighthouses that people can depend on and know that it will lead them to the destination that they wish to be at, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. And I think that's the crucial nugget, is really kind of defining out of this, what are those core competencies that people are going to care about. And again, I think about, just with some of my experience and even just being a fan of just how different some of these sports experiences are going to be coming out of this. Now, do I think that there will come a time where, the Super Bowl will still be an attractive property to attend or to watch on TV? Yes. But will the 2021 Super Bowl look different? I think it might. I think it could look different based on what's been going on. Actually, another question I had for you, Professor, is based on everything that's going on right now in the way that people are communicating. We've obviously seen an increase in the amount of live streaming that's been taking place. We've obviously seen a lot of usage around Instagram, a lot of usage around Zoom, a lot of usage around finding other ways to connect with people using digital means. Do you foresee any of these points of connection continuing even past COVID? Because I find it, especially when it comes to the work from home situation that a lot of employees are now finding themselves in because of what's taking place. I can speak on behalf of my situation, where I think there was a movement that was taking place to get to a point like this, but this experience has forced us to adopt a lot earlier. So I'm curious, kind of when you think about the post-COVID-19 marketing world that we will be, living in hopefully fairly soon, do you think mediums like Zoom and these live streams that we've been seeing on Instagram will become things that are going to be normal to us, that we'll even continue to use them even post COVID-19?
Oh, yeah. I think, some things that we had been questioning or wondering about or delaying or not experimenting with, hey, we were forced to experiment. We realized very quickly that this can work, that the transition is not that hard, that the user experience is quite manageable. So why not? If work from home for a lot of organizations was like, this is not what we like to do, they will now be quite comfortable with it. If brands had not tested and sort of felt the waters of different kinds of media, now they have, and now they'll be coming out of that experience saying, hey, it's not bad, it actually works. Mm-hmm. And so some of those habits might change. What you were talking about earlier, will there be a shift from outdoor to digital? Possible. Print to digital? Possible, right? So there will be new forms of storytelling that will emerge. And new media that will get created, new media platforms that will become popular, that we'll become comfortable with. We'll see a generational shift, right? We might start seeing, older generations, 40 plus, 50 plus, now becoming very comfortable on TikTok or Instagram, or producing content. So what we thought was only accessed by teens and 20-somethings who had limited buying power, we might now find is accessed by 30-somethings who have high buying power, right, or relatively higher buying power. So as those media habits we have experimented with will create a change in where the marketing dollar goes, how it creates relationships. But if this is as short-lived as we are all hoping it will be, hey, come summer, we might come out of the gates with a vengeance and be embracing all our old habits in ways just to be able to celebrate the freedom that we had been denied. Because at the end of the day, when the human being wins, right? When people win, they want to be able to show and celebrate and acclaim and do a lot to make the world notice that win. And we will make ourselves and everybody around us notice the fact that we won this fight with COVID-19 and we came out on top of it. And it might mean suddenly that there is this huge spike in demand and the huge spike in spend. So right now it's wait and watch, and 60 days from now, 90 days from now, hopefully we'll be in a position to say, okay, right, this is what the new world is going to look like. But I think I go back to the point I was trying to make earlier. We cannot let ourselves forget this. We very quickly forgot SARS. We very quickly forgot swine flu, H1N1, Ebola. And we took our eye off the ball. We shifted our investment in healthcare and our stockpiles and our reserves. And we started thinking, why do we need this? Why do we have so much money tied up in products that are not working, right? We started looking at it through the lens of efficiency and return on investment. And some of these things, you can't look at it that way, right? You have to be able to invest in it to be able to prepare for what might be around the corner that you cannot predict. Right? So I'm hoping that new partnerships emerge, a new view of the world emerges, new conversations emerge. We come out of it with a mindset that is much more authentic and genuine, and integrity and honesty become paramount, because we all realize that we are not invincible.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you hit on a lot of key points there, and that last point is the most crucial one. We aren't invincible, and again, I think I do foresee a level of celebration for sure, and I think that will be what ends up, in my eyes, taking over a lot of the key messaging that we see coming out of this. Will be around celebrating, will be around the triumph that we've all gone through in regards to the sacrifices we had to make sure that, this did come to an end, and hopefully a lot of people were able to be spared as well. And it's going to be fascinating. I already predict that a COVID stock will probably be taking place somewhere in Toronto once this is over. But no, it's going to be fascinating, Professor, to see how this shapes the way brands speak to consumers and how consumers react to brands, because I think it's definitely going to allow for some changes, but I think it's also going to allow for some really good opportunity, and I think that's where you'll truly see brands win, is when they take advantage of those opportunities to your point, to be authentic and to really manifest that human spirit that they have within them. So Professor, I really appreciate you spending time talking to us about this. If a lot of the listeners want to reach out to you or want to follow a lot of what you're doing, I do understand that you are on a sabbatical this semester, so I think you chose a good time to be on sabbatical. But do let us know what the best way is to connect with you in case somebody wanted to reach out.
It's fairly easy to find me on McMaster.ca website. When you look at faculty profiles, and all my contact information is there, and people can always reach out through LinkedIn. And happy to help and contribute and do my own little part in making our world a better place to live in.
And have you finished Tiger King yet?
I didn't even start, so I'm part of a generation where, as you guys sign off on Tiger King, I'm wondering what was this phenomena that I missed on.
Yeah, I think at this point, sir, I'm not sure if it's worth catching up on, to be honest, because I find that, again, I think that was that's probably a separate show that we can talk about, but just, I think Tiger King will always be synonymous to social distancing and consumption behaviors, because I do think that this show blew up mainly because of the situation that we're in, and the fact that I think as humans, we were just looking for entertainment, and we were looking for situations that were hopefully worse than ours. But yes, if you have time, I do recommend you watch at least one episode in case you want to see what all the hype's about. But I also don't want you to waste your life. So
next time we meet, we'll philosophize on Tiger King and the need for vaccinations.
Yes, I agree. We definitely should, because I think they go hand in hand. That's Professor Mandeep Malik. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and we can't wait to finally have you in studio when we're allowed, because I think it will certainly be necessary. And yeah, maybe we can revisit a lot of what we just talked about in this last segment in a few months and see where things net out.
Thanks for having me, Nav. It was a pleasure. Wish you well. Wish you good health and safety for you and your loved ones and everyone around us. And may love be our new theory. Exactly.
And I wish you and your family well, because I know your wife is certainly on the front lines. So yeah, thoughts are always with her and the battle that she's facing and the role that she's playing in regards to making everyone safe. So thank you so much. We are going to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be right back here on New Theory Radio on News Talk Sauga 960 AM.
Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa. I am your host.
And this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And I'm very honored now to be joined by a special guest. We have a new show premiering on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. It actually will be airing from Monday to Friday from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. And if you like conspiracy theories, if you have a thing for space, if you have a true affinity for the unknown, you're not going to want to miss this show. It is officially called Spaced Out Radio, and it is hosted by the guest that I have currently joining me. It is Dave Scott. Dave, thanks so much for joining us here on New Theory Radio.
Hey, thank you so much, Nav. What a pleasure it is to join you on your show and to meet some of the hosts that I have at Sauga 960 AM, and to be really brought into the family the way you guys have brought me in is absolutely incredible. I couldn't have thought about it, and I am very excited to bring the strange and the weird to all of the new listeners that we will have on your radio station. I'm very much forward to it, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Hey, anytime. And, we're just as excited to have you join our station. News Talk Sauga 960 AM, since its inception, has been really focused on providing a diverse array of programming. And I feel your show definitely fits with what we try to do here at the station, and that is really allow our listeners to be exposed to different point of views, to different opinions, and as well as different stories. And I think you'll have that for sure with Spaced Out Radio airing each and every night from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Before we just jump into a couple different topics, actually, we will be doing a little bit of theory chat as well, because, normally on New Theory Radio, we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. But because I have the word theory in my show, I've always wanted to talk conspiracy theories. So I am going to be looking forward in a few moments to be speaking with you on some different conspiracies that currently exist and whether or not they're true or false. But before we do that, give us some background. You yourself have a very interesting background when it comes to your media life, and would love to understand how Spaced Out Radio came about.
Well, I worked in radio for nearly 10 years. I graduated from the British Columbia Institute of Technology in 1998 and started my radio career. And then in 2007, I kind of got fed up because I wanted to know what it was like to have food on the table and gas in the tank at the same time. And I was working in sports radio in Vancouver and having a lot of fun with that. But there came a point where you have to put your family first. And, my children were getting older, and I wanted to be able to provide a little bit more for them. So when I walked away from radio and got into the finance industry, I really wanted to make sure that I was making the right decision. And I jumped out of the radio pit, as deep of a hole as that is, and really wanted to focus on my new career, my new family, and really get my life going to where I thought at that time I was 34 years old, and trying to make a mark for myself in life. And when I left radio, I put it all behind and didn't think I would be going back. And unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, in late 2011, I started having really weird experiences that I could not explain. And, I had always been a somewhat of a believer in things like UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot. And I'd always listened to Art Bell at night on the old Coast to Coast AM shows. And it was topics that really included, I thought was a lot of fantasy. And much like a lot of other people, I always thought, this would be really cool if it happened to me. Well, when it did happen to me, the journalist inside of me rekindled its fire, because when you have a minor experience or a major experience, it leads to hundreds of questions, sometimes thousands of questions. And what may have only lasted 2-3 seconds literally provides days and weeks and months and years of thought in trying to figure out what really happened and why did it happen. And so after numerous experiences that I kind of got jumped into, what I started noticing was that these experiences a lot of other people were having, but there wasn't a lot of real quality conduits out there where we could learn. And the more I looked into my own experiences, whether it was seeing UFOs, or I remember being in the forest with a buddy of mine behind his property in Mission, British Columbia, and we were within 100 feet of two Sasquatch.
Wow, really?
And, yeah, and so when you look at these experiences, and then you go online or you watch the television shows or you read books, I always felt that there were things that were similar, but it wasn't quite what I was experiencing. So an example of that is one night I was standing on my patio with some friends, and we saw a black triangle over top of my house. And the entire undercarriage was lit up with these orange rods that were connected to these silver orbs. And we watched this ship. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. There was no sound. And three of us watched it fly. It was like an invisible door opened up in the sky, and this craft flew right through that door and disappeared. And, you know, when you go online and you look up black triangles, there's lots of photos of them, you know, but they only have each point lit up with these lights, and maybe there's a light in the middle of the craft. But the one we saw had the entire undercarriage lit up. So, I mean, there were all these similarities, but there was nothing exactly to what was happening to me. And this got me very frustrated, Nav. And I couldn't figure out where to look, because the more I looked, the more frustrated I got. And so finally, in November of 2014, we launched Spaced Out Radio. And about a month before that, a good buddy of mine had said to me, Dave, you know, we got to get you back into radio. This is stuff that you're a natural at. And I'm like, dude, you just can't walk into a radio station and say, hey, put me on at night. I've got a great show concept. I said, that's not how it works. And he introduced me to digital radio, which I knew nothing of. Like I said, when I left radio, I left for good. But we launched it on November 30th, 2014. I remember the days of having 12 to 15 listeners a night and wondering if this project was even worth it. And then all of a sudden the people started showing up and the people started arriving, because there is not a lot of true radio talent or broadcast talent in the paranormal field. Sure, there are thousands of podcasts on this subject, but there is a big difference between the journalism side of what we are going through and somebody saying, you know, I've dealt with hauntings my whole life. I'm going to start a podcast and I'm going to talk about experiences, you know, and radio is tough. Media is tough, and you have to be able to try and bring the two together with that creativity. So I think that's what we've done with Spaced Out Radio, and our numbers have grown. Our audience is very loyal, and we are expanding at a great rate right now, which includes launching on Sauga 960 AM.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say too is, you know, I still remember as a kid tuning into Art Bell's show. I think I told you when we talked on the phone earlier this week that there was this late night wrestling radio show that I used to stay up and listen to when I was, I'd say, grade 8, grade 9, so very like 13, 14, 15 years old. And what I would do is, because the radio show would air 11 p.m. on Sundays, and I had school on Mondays, I would sometimes leave the radio on, pretty much listen while I was in bed, and then go to sleep soon after. But the Art Bell show would air right after the radio show, and because a lot of the stuff he was talking about was around, Bigfoot and UFOs abducting people and Area 51, I would have some very interesting dreams during that time. Oh, yeah. But indirectly, I started to become a fan of a lot of that stuff. And even when you think about, I'm glad you mentioned, podcasts and just how, there's there isn't a huge focus on paranormal on terrestrial radio as there used to be, but podcasts seem to be taking over when it comes to these types of topics, and again, it can be put into question regarding whether or not a lot of the information that we get through some of these means is legit or not. But it seems that a lot of this paranormal conversation has become almost counterculture. Like, it's not really a lot of it isn't really at the forefront because of the internet age that we live in. So I'm glad your show is bringing that back, because I think there is still an audience for these types of conversations, and radio has always been the best means for it.
I fully agree with you. And, we have a little bit of a blessing here with Spaced Out Radio, because we get to have fun with what we do. And, there are some times, my friend, that I will say that I don't believe what the guest is saying. I think it's way too far out there for myself. And I consider myself a grand wearer of the tinfoil hat. That being said, I will say this: who am I, after what I have experienced personally, who am I to sit there and say that someone else's experiences are not correct because I haven't experienced them that way? That's the beauty of it all. We can sit here and say, oh, this is imagination, or this isn't real, or aliens don't exist. Why do we waste our time on broadcasting about certain things? And look, there are people out there who listen to my show, and I've read the critiques. I'm somebody who tries to stay on top of everything, because I think that's how we try and age and get better with what we are doing. But if we don't delve into them, if we don't delve into the experiences people claim they are having, how do we really know that these situations aren't truly happening? I mean, I have heard stories that are incredible, and ones that I look at it and I sit there and say that, come on, there is no way that this is true, that somebody can be healed by aliens or have that much contact or whatever it may be. But then I always have to bring myself back to the resolution: I've never stood in that person's shoes. Who am I to sit there and say that if I want people to believe me about my own experiences, who am I to sit there and say that their experiences are wrong? That's not right. It's not true. And, so we have this motto with Spaced Out Radio that we believe everybody. And the reason why we do is because we want people to know that they could tell us the wackiest of stories. And you know what? We have the people who can investigate those. We have the people who can look into those stories to sit there and say, you know what? You are telling the truth. We do believe you. Other people have experienced that same type of deal or phenomena. And once you get that trust from people that they have been able to put their faith, that you're not going to ridicule them, that you're not going to make fun of them, that you're going to trust what they say and how they say it, and look into their stories, and then you hear something that is quite eerily similar from someone else, then you know there is something going on. I mean, in journalism, we always had this story of if you hear it once, it's a rumor. If you hear it twice, it's got legs. If you hear it a third time, you've got yourself a story. And when you hear some of these phenomenal stories that people and experiences that people are having, there's just no way that you could have somebody sitting in downtown Toronto claiming that they have been sucked through their windows, into a spacecraft and taken aboard an alien ship. And then you hear the exact same story from somewhere in California from another person who doesn't even know the person that you originally talked to. So the phenomena is out there. It's about how much energy and effort do we want to put into this. Now, there are people out there who will say, this isn't worth it. This isn't quality. Why are you wasting our time looking into something that isn't real? Well, the one thing that I always respond to that is, who says it's not real? Does science? Because I know scientists that are looking into this phenomena because they do believe it's real. Is it a personal opinion? And if it is a personal opinion, we also then have to look at it. So you're not really conducting science, you're conducting opinion because you don't want to believe. So there's a bunch of different tangents that we have to go by here. And sometimes it gets difficult, but for the most part, it's a lot of fun. And going down the rabbit hole is always an adventure.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you clarified that, Dave, because some would say, and again, you have your people with differing opinions when it comes to paranormal activity and really around the unknown. Some would say that shows like yours, depending on who you're having on as a guest and their credibility, are you spewing fake news? But the way I see it, and I think the way you see it, is when it comes to the paranormal, I think what really allows it to have such broad appeal with broadening opinions is because no one really knows. Like, no one really, and again, I'm glad you clarified the experience aspect of it, because unless you've had that experience, you're never fully going to believe. It's not until it actually happens to you where you actually say, well, you know what? I did think, a lot of this paranormal stuff was, just lame mumbo jumbo, but I did kind of have a moment a few days ago, and, it did make me think about, hey, maybe there's something here. Like, there's some people right now that feel like this corona stuff, it could be paranormal related. Like, people don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this, I can't tell you how many conversations I have had with people over the last 5 years that I've been doing this, where people will come up to me and they'll say, well, what do you do for a living? I say, well, I host a paranormal radio show. And they'll be like, you believe in that crap? You really believe that there's aliens in another planet or Sasquatch, walking around the forest? And I say, yes. And it's automatically funny that when they realize that you're serious, all right, they always say, well, there was this one time at my grandmother's farm back in wherever it may be, where my sister and I were out playing in the field, and we heard these strange noises coming from the barn. And, we saw something. We're not sure what it was, but we saw something run out of the barn, and it looked like no animal that we've ever seen. And it was walking on 2 feet, and it made this horrific screaming sound. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Because once people know that you're not going to make fun of them, it's amazing how people come out of the woodwork to tell you their stories. And really, that's all it is we're telling stories. There is no science behind all of this. There is science trying to figure out. I know numerous scientists with degrees in things that I could never, ever imagine looking into this phenomena, because they know there is something to it. And a good scientist friend of mine, Dr. Chris Cogswell, who comes on my show for a segment that we do called Reality Paranormal, and the audience at Sauga will get to know him a little bit. Here's a gentleman who has his doctorate in chemical engineering, and here he is looking into the UFO phenomena. And I remember asking him one day, I said, Chris, why doesn't the scientific community take this seriously? He goes, Dave, most scientists do. He goes, you're forgetting something very, very important here. He goes, most scientists are nerds. We're geeks. We're people who are looking into things because we had an interest in Star Trek, and we had an interest in Star Wars and the technology that was behind all of these strange craft and lasers and lightsabers that we were seeing. So to say we're not interested is wrong. He goes, however, when you were dealing with the scientific community and you were dealing with numbers and you were dealing with grants and you're dealing with people who are pushing money into things, he goes, you have to be careful, because there's a lot of people out there who do not believe, but he goes, it's not the scientific community, it's the people who are asking for the research to be done. And that's the biggest difference. He goes, we're geeks. We want to, we want to see hyperspeed. We want to go through these wormholes. We want to figure this out. That's why we get into science. And that never resonated with me until he had actually said that. So there is a big part of the scientific community that wants to get into this, that wants to believe, that wants to see where this phenomena goes. However, it's the difficulty of finding that phenomena that actually works, and that's the tough part.
So just to touch on some of the topics of conversation that you guys do discuss on Spaced Out Radio, I thought it'd be kind of neat to maybe get some thoughts or opinions on some conspiracies or some different topics that usually come up quite a lot when people think about radio shows like Spaced Out Radio and other types of programming that fall within the same vein.
Yeah.
And again, Dave, feel free to either share a perspective of your own, or even share, if you have discussed any of these in prior episodes, feel free to shed light through some of those conversations as well. But you did talk about earlier how this was off air, that you were going to go outside and search for Sasquatch maybe later. Is Bigfoot real?
I tend to think that he is. I had an experience back in September of 2013 in my friend's backyard, in Mission, British Columbia, where we actually saw two of them. And we were within about 100 feet of them. The first one was kind of hiding behind a tree, and it was eerie because it was peering out at us, almost like, "Are you there? Can you see me? Are you not there?" Like it was checking us out, and that was kind of freaky because here it is, kind of just there. I don't know how else to put it. It was just there.
Wow.
And we're trying to figure out, what are we really seeing, what we are seeing, and if we are seeing what we are seeing, what the heck is it, and why is it here? And then as we turned down the trail to go back towards my friend's house, that's where I saw the second one even closer, and it was walking through these small trees and shrubs that were kind of bouncing around and shaking. And man, I got a full right side profile, back profile up to the head. I never saw the face. I could tell you the reddish brown hair that it had. It never looked at me. It just kept on walking. And it was massive, probably 350 pounds plus.
Wow.
And I was just amazed that there it was, this mystery that that I've been interested in ever since the Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967. I was just stunned and dumbfounded. And how do you react to that? How are you supposed to react to that? What do you do? Well, you just say, "Wow, I can't believe that didn't happen," or "that just happened," one of the two. So, I mean, there's a lot of theories out there as to what is real and what is not. And look, we don't know the majority of things and the majority of secrets that this planet has. Scientifically speaking, we are still relatively in an infant stage of it all. And the one thing that many in the scientific community are trying to provide is an understanding that there is more to this world than what we know. There is more out there than we have been able to figure out. I mean, you only have to look as far as the ocean. You don't have to believe me about aliens or Bigfoot or whatever. Look at the ocean. We have only, I believe, expanded our knowledge of the ocean up to about 10% of its secrets, and that 10% number may be high. So for us to sit here and say that we know everything that is going on in the water, up in space, wherever we may be, that's very naive thinking of a mainstream crowd that doesn't want to take the time or put the energy into learning that there might just be something else out there.
And actually, as you talk about the sea, another one that seems to come up quite a bit is the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland. Now, I know, just like Bigfoot, and I'm glad you mentioned that the footage of Bigfoot from the 1960s, because I think that's that's always been highly debated footage of whether or not that was real or not, or doctored. And I think Loch Ness is the same way. There's images online. There's video footage of the so-called Loch Ness Monster, pretty much holding court up in the UK. Do you feel like that's real?
You know what? When it comes to sea monsters that are landlocked, this is where my skepticism comes in. I mean, not just Loch Ness, but here in British Columbia, just south of me in Kelowna, you have the Ogopogo.
Yeah.
But when you learn about Lake Okanagan and you learn that it is a breeding area for the large white sturgeon, okay, and that Okanagan Lake is the start of the Columbia River that eventually divides Washington State and Oregon to get to the Pacific Ocean, you sit there and you think, well, maybe it's just a large sturgeon that is out there, or maybe it's a large freshwater eel that's been able to adapt. It's hard for me to fathom that there could be dinosaurs still out there. However, there are people having sightings. There are people in Texas and Mexico who claim that they are still seeing pterodactyl-type birds flying around the sky with wingspans of about 40 feet long.
Wow.
Is it true? I don't know. I mean, the Loch Ness Monster could very well be there. We could be looking at some sort of phenomena, but we also have to remember, too, that in order for a creature like that to survive, it's not just one creature, because we always try to individualize it. The big question is, how many creatures are there if it is a dinosaur-like creature? And that is part of the bigger mystery, because it has to have breeding capabilities in order to survive. And if it has breeding capabilities, then there must be 1 or 2 more, or 10 more, or 100 more. And if so, why are we not seeing them as often as we would like to or expect to? All right. So there's a lot of different types of questions that come up with these topics. And it's more than just saying, yeah, I had a sighting. Like with Bigfoot, for instance, okay, you look at the majority of Canada. Okay, 90% of the Canadian population lives within 1 hour of the United States border, which means that we are very, very close to within the 100-kilometer range of the border. That means there is a lot of vast territory between British Columbia and Newfoundland and all the way north that this creature has the ability to go out and hide in the forest. All right? We also need to remember, too, that we are still, to this day, finding creatures and marsupials and animals and mammals and fish and every type of species every year. There's an announcement on new species that have been found and detected. So we have to remember that we may not know. I mean, just remember, it was only until the late 1800s that we learned that the platypus was real. Up until then, there were only reports of it. And the platypus was known as a cryptid creature, a monster, or the silverback apes of Africa. That's another one. They weren't discovered until the mid like around 1920, 1930, somewhere around there. All right. So there are creatures out there that are continuously being discovered, and it's a matter of when do we find out if Sasquatch is real, and will we ever? But you also, if you look at the conspiratorial side, if we put the tinfoil on here for a second, if it is proven that Sasquatch is real, what are the ramifications of that? The ramifications are that a lot of the logging communities where this creature has been seen and found will probably be shut down, which costs millions of dollars, which costs millions of jobs, all right, puts people out of work. Because if you have an endangered species or potentially new species, the scientific community comes in and they now have to learn about it. They have to try and figure out, okay, what does this creature feed on? What is its lifespan? Where does it go? What's it hunting for? Can we keep its living conditions in an area that is not going to be affected by any type of man-made opportunity like logging or fisheries or things like that. So there is a lot that goes into what happens when these creatures are brought out. In the state of Oregon, they actually had to shut down an entire area of forest to forestry, which cost millions of dollars to the logging community because there was an endangered species of an owl found nesting in that logging area. Wow. So, I mean, there are financial ramifications to finding a creature like Sasquatch as well.
One last conspiracy that I want to ask you about, Dave, and this definitely relates well to your show, Spaced Out Radio, is really life in space. There's obviously been a lot of conversation as to whether or not humans are the only ones that exist within this galaxy, and would love to get your perspective on that. I'm sure that's been a topic of conversation quite a lot on your program. And have you ever interviewed anybody that had a terrestrial encounter with an alien?
Well, I have interviewed numerous people who have had extraterrestrial encounters, and not only that, but have seen all sorts of different UFOs, and you know, there's an entire UFO community out there online if you want to look it on up. And if you're on Twitter, just hashtag UFO Twitter, and you can jump into the great debate on UFOs in there. And sometimes, I mean, it's like an old-fashioned 1970s Philadelphia Flyers, Boston Bruins hockey brawl when you're getting into UFOs. But yeah, there are a lot of people out there who have said they have been face-to-face with extraterrestrials, who say they have had communication from beings from another planet, that they've seen black triangles flying over their houses. They want to know what's happened since Roswell in 1947 in the desert of New Mexico, where there were a couple of crashes of UFOs. So there is a lot of information out there regarding this. Do I personally believe? Yes, we do. Yeah, I personally believe 100% that there are some sort of extraterrestrial beings that are visiting this planet. And why not? I mean, we're a beacon of noise. We are a beacon of light. I mean, our sound, you know, for people who may not understand this, but if you look at it scientifically speaking, and I'm going to say this with my limited scientific mind, I mean, we are like the Kmart blue light special in our solar system, because we make a lot of noise, and if there's something flying out there, you know, it's going to find us because of the amount of noise our planet makes. I mean, and let's not forget too, okay, in order to gain credibility, there's a lot of people looking into this. Okay, there's a lot of people wondering, you know, have we reverse engineered technology? I mean, that goes back to 1989 when a gentleman named Bob Lazar came out in the public saying that, you know, he worked at Area 51 at a secret base called S4, and that his job was to try and reverse engineer crashed spacecraft that were hidden inside a mountainside base. And there were, I believe, 9 or 10 craft in that facility that they were working, you know. And so, you know, then on the flip side, if you talk to somebody who's an actual experiencer, it's an absolute nightmare. All right, it has affected their lives. It's cost them friends. It's cost them jobs. It's cost them family, marriages, children. There's a lot out there that affects people. So, I mean, you want to believe. I try and give the benefit of the doubt, because I've seen things that I can't explain and don't make sense to me, and I want to be able to know why this is happening. And in the end, whether you've seen aliens, whether your house is haunted, or you've seen Bigfoot or fairies in the forest, or you're working in your garden and your garden gnomes start moving, okay, people just want to know, why me? That is the $1 million question to all of this. Why me? And when somebody has something strange happen to them, there are not a lot of outlets where you can go. You just can't talk to your family about this. For most people, you just can't talk to your friends without being laughed at. You can't talk to your coworkers. If you go to church and you go talk to your minister or your priest about this, you're going to be, marked that you're being involved with demons or something along those lines, and negative energy. And so what we try to tell people on Spaced Out Radio is, look, this phenomenon is real. So there are things happening that we cannot explain. And if we can be that conduit to help somebody out, that's what we're going to try and do.
And I'm so glad that you have your show as a safe space for these conversations to take place, Dave, because I think it's very, very important. And again, you're not really, like I said earlier, you're not really going to believe until it actually happens to you. And I'm glad that Spaced Out Radio is available to share some of these perspectives and have these conversations, because, again, we don't know what's out there, but as soon as we find out, we're going to need to address it. So why not get ahead of it, right? So,
and that's it.
That's definitely it. And Dave, thanks so much. We're super excited to have you a part of the News Talk Sauga 960 AM family. Do you want to maybe provide a preview of what the audience can expect from your first week on our station?
Oh, we are getting into some real good stuff. We're going to take a deep look into Area 51 and stealth projects with a gentleman named James Goodall. We're going to be getting into the science side of everything with a couple of scientists. I mentioned one, Chris Cogswell, who will be on the show, where we kind of look into the scientific side of the phenomena. We're going to be getting into everything from near-death experiences to ghosts in your house and what you can do if your place is haunted. Who do you call? We just try and educate and tell stories. And if you have any information or you want to know more, you can check out our website, which is spacedoutradio.com. If you're on Twitter, you can follow us at Spaced Out Radio. And, Instagram is Dave Scott, SOR. We're all over Facebook. Just type in Spaced Out Radio. We're easy to find there. And if you want to know more or you have a question, just hit me up. We always have somebody who is willing to help answer. I'll help answer. I'm not someone who goes, speaks on the radio and then goes and hides for the rest of the day. No, I'm very hands-on. I want to hear the stories too, because in the end, we're all searching for the same thing, and that's the answers to what is really going on. And if we can shed some light on that on Sauga 960 AM each and every night for just one person, we've done our job.
That's amazing, Dave. That's Dave Scott, the host and creator of Spaced Out Radio. Again, it begins airing this Monday, which is actually tomorrow if you are listening to this. Actually, if you're listening to our show on Monday, which is between 8 to 10 p.m., it actually airs right after this episode. So definitely check it out. It is Spaced Out Radio here on News Talk Sauga 960 AM. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to bring you back, man. I think we're going to have to talk more about some of these other conspiracy theories. I wanted to talk to you about Paul McCartney and whether or not we have the real or fake Paul McCartney right now, but maybe we can save that for a future episode.
I'm there. All you got to do is let me know, and I will be there for you. Thank you so much for your time and your audience's time. And personally, I think Paul is dead, but we can go through that.
Thanks so much, Dave. We're going to take a quick commercial break here on News Talk Sauga 960 AM, and we'll be right back on New Theory Radio.
Theory Radio.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk, Sauga 960 AM. My name is Nav Nanwa, and this is the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. Special thanks to Professor Mandeep Malik for joining me earlier to talk all things marketing on this week's episode, as well as Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio to talk about the wonderful new show that we have here on Sauga 960 AM entitled Spaced Out Radio, which premieres on Monday, April 6th from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Yes, we finally have some late night programming here on Sauga 960 AM, and I know he has a wonderful slate of shows lined up for his premiere week here on the station. And again, the show airs Monday to Friday from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So definitely check that out. And this concludes this week's edition of New Theory Radio. So I thank you again for tuning in. If you want to connect with me, it is at @nnanwa on Twitter, at Nav Nanwa on Instagram. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio across all platforms. If you want to connect with Sauga 960 AM, it is at Sauga 960 AM across all platforms. Special thanks to Dusty Loops for producing our instrumental. Big shout outs to Amit Nanwa, my little brother, aka at Colorblind Photography. He's been churning out a lot of video content that we've been utilizing on our socials. We're repurposing our content in sizable bites so that you can tune in and maybe listen in on some of the stuff that we've done over the last few months. So big shout outs to him. We're definitely keeping busy as we stay quarantined, and you need to stay quarantined as well. Let's flatten this curve so that we can get back to doing what we love. And I know what we love to do here at New Theory Radio is really connect with you. So we are going to continue to produce shows no matter what the situation is, as we feel it is our duty to do that. Thank you so much. This concludes this week's episode, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.
At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.